Ryan Day is a national championship winning head coach. I hope everyone heard me, because that's not necessarily something that everyone expected to be saying in late November, and I think we all know what I'm talking about here. He, by the way, is about 20 yards off to my right. Ohio State has won the national championship. So I am standing on a bed of scarlet and gray confetti. Ohio State was favored to win this thing. They won it by a little over the margin that we thought they'd win it by. Biggest takeaway here is I cannot help but take myself back to this very building, about, I'd say 90 to 100 yards away from where I'm standing right now. It was New Year's Eve, giving way to New Year's Day, 2022 to 2023. Ohio State field goal attempt goes, I believe, wide left. They lose to Georgia in the semifinal. Otherwise, they probably go on to handle TCU and win a national title. I said coming out of that one that Ryan Day is a national championship caliber coach. There's just the difference between having done it and maybe it still being in the future. A lot of folks sort of drifted towards can't, which was always ignorant to me. So that's moot point number one now, because he's won a national championship. But I don't think we could play this thing, guys, 10, 15, 20 years in the future, even with the new format, even with an expanded college football playoff, and ever see someone, a team, a person, period, go through the highest of highs, lowest of lows over the span not of years, but of a few weeks. I sat there along with the rest of you. Some of you were in the shoe for the Michigan game. A lot of you watched on TV. And I'm watching at the end, and I'm thinking, this is utter devastation. I mean, when you consider what the expectations of this team are, when you consider what's invested, when you consider what the standard and what the expectation level is, and when you knew what the talking points around Ryan Day were, this is utter devastation. But yet you also have a voice in the back of your mind that says, we got 12 teams that we put in this thing now. And you still got an opportunity. And I don't think, no matter how much you pay someone, there is a duplication for the ability to take an organization, much less just yourself, but to take an organization and to get it back up off the deck. And to be honest, a lot of the leadership in that locker room probably took care of that along with coaches, but to get back up off the deck and to end up winning this thing, to end up making a run. They end up beating top five AP teams over the course of this run that they go on to win a national championship. Ultra impressive. So the game tonight specifically, there were some non-negotiables that we talked about for Notre Dame. Felt like if they had another opponent run for over 200 on them, it would spell bad things. Another two-possession lead someone had on them would spell bad things. That ended up happening here, and turnovers weren't a huge edge for Notre Dame in this one. I think there was one, and it ends up being pretty inconsequential. It's not something that anyone will talk about, but think about how this started now. I'm telling you, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about what needs to happen and what kind of tone needs to be set, and you can't let Ohio State come out of the gate and just cut your throat, basically. And Notre Dame goes on like an 18-play, 7.5, 8-minute drive, whatever it was. They score a touchdown. And then what happened is Ohio State didn't flinch. And that is a lot different than the vibe that team gave off in the Michigan game. I wouldn't say they gave off that vibe in the Oregon game, but the Michigan game, they gave off a vibe of, man, rattled. Now we got to play not to lose. And instead, they get down 7-0 here tonight, and it is boom, 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 boom. Extended drives, by the way, not quick strike stuff. They took exactly what Notre Dame gave them. Huge testament to Will Howard, huge testament to Chip Kelly, and they go up big. And I know this thing got kind of close at the end. And by the way, had Notre Dame ended up coming back and tying this thing or winning it, it would have been the most surreal, weird-feeling win I think I've ever seen. Now, it didn't happen, but there was a moment there before Howard hits the big play to Jeremiah Smith down the sideline, which was open on second down too, by the way. Before he did that, you're sitting there thinking in the back of your mind. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I've already written the story of this game in my mind. I called it a splattering. We were going to have to call it the unsplattering if Notre Dame came back to win. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that, because you only get to make that mistake once in your life. You only get to call a game a splattering, and it end up going the other way once, and then you can never use the phrase. I would have had to retire it. So Ohio State's a national championship winning team now. I don't feel an ounce different about Ryan Day. Now, you may feel differently than me on that. I know a lot of you, there's nothing wrong with this, by the way. I may be in the minority on this. I know a lot of you look at how you judge coaches, and you just count championships. I've never really done it that way. They're worth a lot. It makes your Wikipedia page look great, but I've always been a believer in which ones can put their teams in the right place multiple times, because the right time will eventually find them. Kirby Smart was that way for a while. Kirby for a while, even though everyone's whitewashed history and no one remembers this now, Kirby for a while was the guy that couldn't get over the hump, couldn't beat Nick Saban, couldn't win the big one. And then he got over the hump and he beat Saban and won a couple of titles in a row, and no one talks like that anymore. They had just copied and pasted all that nonsense and started labeling Ryan Day the same way. So now you look at him, some will, completely differently. Same dude he was this morning when he woke up, and for that matter, had they lost this game tonight, he'd be the same dude. It's just you put yourself in the right place enough times, and the right time finally finds you. Now, moving forward, I'd say the same thing about Notre Dame's team as I would about Ohio State. They just happen to be holding the belt. You don't ever assume that you'll get this collection again. You don't ever assume you'll get this confluence of circumstances again. Because who amongst us, or whomst amongst us, is to say that the Michigan loss wasn't ultimately good to fuel this outcome? I hate saying that because I think rivalries are the bedrock tradition of the sport, but that is where we are today. The Notre Dame side, there's going to be a lot of talk right now. I will participate in it, by the way, that I don't think this is a blip on the radar screen. I think their program will be right back there, but I'm also around this team, been around them a fair amount down the stretch. There is no duplicating how close, how tight-knit, how sort of communal, band of brothers, even if you will, that locker room feels, and that team and that organization feels. It's not that you can't have a strong team every year. It's not that, the program standing on values and principles won't produce a similar result every year. But I've learned, man, covering the sport, watching this sport, loving the sport my whole life, it means something when you get close. You got to go win these things because you're never guaranteed to get back there again. I don't care if you recruit your tail off. You're never guaranteed to get back there again. And the path has only gotten harder. It gives light, it gives oxygen to more teams, but the path to actually go win one of these things only gets harder. Hope Marcus Freeman is back here. Hope they get another shot. The talk about Ryan Day and Ohio State now will be, okay, what does the future hold? Now he's won one, now how many more can he win? Maybe he'll never win another one. Maybe he'll win 4. I'm just telling you, I think the dude's the same dude he's been for a long time. I personally am really happy for him. But I also, look, I can't wait to see what happens to that organization. And I'm speaking holistically, program, organization instead of team, because next year's will not look the same. A lot of these dudes were brought back. A lot of these guys were enticed to come back, partly because they believed in Ohio State and finishing a drill they hadn't filled. The other part was they invested in them. One of the most foolish and misguided talking points that still exists even tonight, even as they've won this title around this team, was, well, that's $20 million. That's what it'll buy you. As if they went and just supermarket sweep style knocked a bunch of players into a checkout line and look, we got the winning team in our basket here. Fact of the matter is they went and got a few big-time players like Caleb Downs and Quinshon Judkins, but spent a vast majority of that $20 million to keep guys they recruited home for one more go-around, to keep them from going to the draft for one more go-around. Look at who's doing that right now. Penn State's trying that. Alabama's trying that. A lot of programs understand that's actually the way to go. You spend some on the periphery if you want to sustain on portal talent, but the name of the game has been and still is and will continue to be evaluate properly, recruit guys out of high school, find the ones you can win with, and invest in them. And then put the cherries on top through the portal. I'm kind of glad Ohio State did it that way, because if you've been paying attention this year, you've seen the portal's not the path. The portal's a nice supplement, but recruiting, evaluation, and supreme in-house development and structuring your spending the right way, that's the way to do it. It's just that it sounds a little bit differently now. So congrats to Ryan Day, Ohio State, 34-23, a national championship win. Pleasure to cover that team.